The Starlight Academy floated in the darkness of space like a jewel made of glass and light. It hung in orbit above the planet, spinning slowly, catching the glow of distant suns on its crystal walls. From far away, it looked like a flower frozen in ice. Up close, it was even more beautiful. Towers made of white stone rose from the main structure. Gardens filled with strange and colorful plants grew in zero gravity, their leaves drifting like dreams. Bridges of light connected one building to another, and everywhere there was the soft sound of music playing from hidden speakers. This was not just any school. This was the most famous academy for young women in all 12 star systems. The daughters of kings came here. The children of great scientists studied in these halls. Girls from species that had traveled the stars for 10,000 years walked these corridors, learning art and science and philosophy. The academy had existed for 300 years, and in all that time, not a single weapon had ever been allowed inside its walls. Headmistress stood at the window of her office, watching the morning light touch the gardens below. She was old now, her hair turned silver by the years, but her eyes were still sharp and kind. She had run this school for 40 years. She had seen thousands of students come and go. She had watched frightened young girls become confident young women, ready to take their place among the stars. It was her life's work, and she loved it deeply. The morning assembly was about to begin. Could hear the students gathering in the great hall below, their voices rising and falling like waves. She smiled and turned from the window. Another ordinary day at Starlight Academy. In the dormitory on the eastern side of the station, a girl named was brushing her hair in front of a mirror. She was 17 years old, with dark eyes and a curious mind. She had come to Starlight Academy 2 years ago to study xenobiology, the science of alien life. She loved learning about the strange creatures that lived on distant worlds. Every day brought new wonders, new questions to answer. Her best friend sat on the bed behind her, reading something on a small screen, was quiet and shy, with a talent for mathematics that amazed even the teachers. She rarely spoke in class, but when she did, her words were always worth hearing. The two girls had been friends since their first day at the academy. They were as different as night and day, but somehow that made their friendship stronger. "We should go," said, putting down her brush. "Assembly starts in 10 minutes." Nodded but did not look up from her screen. "Did you finish the homework for xenobiology?" "Mostly. I still need to write the conclusion." Walked to the window and looked out at the gardens. A movement caught her eye and she leaned closer to see. Down in the garden, a man was working among the flowers. He was human, which was rare in this part of the galaxy. Humans had only learned to travel between stars about 100 years ago. Most species considered them primitive, like children who had just learned to walk. This human was the only one at the academy. His name was, and he worked as a groundskeeper, caring for the plants and fixing things that broke. Watched him for a moment. He was in his early 30s, she guessed, though it was hard to tell with humans. His face looked older than it should, weathered by some invisible storm. His hands were rough with work. He moved slowly through the garden, touching each plant with gentle care as if they were old friends. She had noticed things about him that others missed. The old scars on his arms, visible when his sleeves rode up. The way his eyes sometimes went distant, looking at something that was not there. The careful way he walked, like a man who was always ready for something to go wrong. She had wondered about his story many times but had never found the courage to ask. Some of the other students were not so thoughtful. They laughed at him behind his back. They called him names, mocking his primitive species, his simple job, his quiet ways. Had seen their cruelty and felt ashamed of it, but she had never spoken up. It was easier to stay silent. She told herself it was not her problem. Never seemed to notice the mockery, or if he did, he never showed it. He just continued his work, day after day, asking nothing from anyone. He spoke only when spoken to. He ate alone in the maintenance section. He was a ghost at the edge of their bright world, barely visible, easily forgotten. "Come on," was at the door now, waving at her. "We're going to be late." took one last look at the man in the garden. He had stopped working and was looking up at the sky, at something she could not see. His body was very still. Then he shook his head and returned to his plants, and the moment passed. "Coming," said, and followed her friend out the door. The great hall was filled with students when they arrived. Girls from a dozen different species sat together on floating chairs, their bodies ranging from nearly human to things that still struggled to understand. Some had skin the color of the ocean. Others had 4 arms or eyes that glowed with inner light. All of them wore the white uniform of Starlight Academy, the symbol of their shared purpose and unity. Headmistress walked to the center of the stage, and the room fell silent. She smiled at them, her old face warm with affection. "Good morning, students," she said. "Today we begin a new week of learning and growth. I want to remind you all of the values that make this academy special. Here, we do not believe in violence. We do not solve problems with force. We use our minds, our hearts, our understanding. That is what makes us civilized. That is what separates us from the darkness that exists in some corners of the galaxy." Listened with half her attention. She had heard versions of this speech many times before. The Academy was proud of its pacifist philosophy. It was part of what made it famous. No weapons, no violence, no exceptions. Peace through wisdom, understanding through study. It was a beautiful idea, believed in it mostly. But sometimes, late at night, she wondered what would happen if something came that could not be reasoned with. What would they do then? She pushed the thought away. Such things did not happen at Starlight Academy. They were safe here, protected by distance and secrecy. The Academy's location was classified at the highest level. No one who meant them harm could ever find them. The assembly continued. Teachers made announcements. Students received awards for their achievements. The morning passed slowly, peacefully, like every morning before it. In the garden had stopped working again. He was staring at a point in the sky that was still empty. His hands, those rough hands, were trembling slightly. He did not know why. He only knew that something was wrong. He had learned to trust his instincts long ago, in a life he tried very hard to forget. Those instincts had kept him alive through things that would have broken other men. They were screaming at him now, telling him that danger was coming, that death was on its way. He looked up at the peaceful academy, at the beautiful towers and gardens and bridges of light. He thought of all the young lives inside those walls, lives that had never known true fear. Then the proximity alarms began to scream, and the peaceful morning ended forever. The alarm was the worst sound it ever heard. It cut through the air like a knife, high and sharp and terrible. All around her, students began to scream. The peaceful assembly turned into chaos in the space of a single heartbeat. Girls jumped from their floating chairs and ran in every direction, not knowing where to go, knowing only that something was very wrong. Headmistress raised her hands and called for calm, but her voice was lost in the noise. Teachers tried to organize the students, pointing toward the emergency exits, but panic had taken hold. 300 years of peace had not prepared anyone for this moment. Grabbed hand and pulled her toward the nearest door. Her friend was shaking, her face pale with fear. "What's happening?" asked, her voice barely a whisper. "I don't know," said, "but we need to get to the escape pods now." They pushed through the crowd and made it to the corridor outside. Through the windows could see the stars, peaceful and eternal. For a moment she thought maybe it was a false alarm, a mistake, nothing to worry about. Then she saw it. The thing that came out of folded space was something from a nightmare. It was a creature of metal and flesh, 300 meters long, its body twisting through the void like a snake made of fire and shadow. Its scales were a mixture of living tissue and self-repairing armor. Its eyes burned with a light that seemed to pierce through walls and skin and bone. Great wings spread from its back, wings that should not have worked in the vacuum of space but somehow did. The people had a name for these creatures. They called them infernal dragons of the deep void. They were ancient things, older than most civilizations, born in the darkness between galaxies. They fed on heat, on thermal energy, on the warmth of living bodies. Where they went, they left only cold and death. Entire planets had been abandoned because of them. Whole species had been driven to extinction. This one was young by their standards, barely 1,000 years old, but it was hungry. It had traveled far to find this place, drawn by the warmth of 300 young bodies gathered in one location. It did not know what an academy was. It did not understand the concept of students or teachers or learning. It knew only hunger, endless and burning. The academy's shields activated automatically, a dome of energy surrounding the station. The slammed against them once, twice, and the whole structure shook. Students fell to the ground. Lights flickered. Somewhere, something important broke with a sound of tearing metal. In her office, headmistress was shouting into a communication device. "This is Starlight Academy. We are under attack. We need immediate assistance. Please, anyone who can hear this, we need help." The message went out into the void. The nearest military base was 4 hours away at maximum speed. Help was coming, but it would arrive far too late. It opened its great mouth and fire poured out. Not ordinary fire, but plasma, superheated matter that burned at temperatures beyond imagination. The shields held for 4 minutes. Then they failed. The first blast hit the communications array, and its voice was cut off mid-sentence. The second blast struck the eastern dormitory, the place where Anne had brushed their hair and worried about homework just an hour ago. The building collapsed inward and felt something inside her chest break as she watched it fall. How many students had been inside? How many of her classmates were now gone? "We have to move," she shouted dragging her friend down the corridor. "The escape pods are on the western side." But the way was blocked. Debris had fallen across the main passage, and flames were spreading from a ruptured power conduit. They turned back, searching for another route, but everywhere they went, there was fire or rubble or the screams of trapped students. They ended up in the central courtyard, the heart of the academy. The glass ceiling above them showed a perfect view of the creatures circling the station, preparing for another attack. About 40 other students were trapped there with them, girls from different years and different species, united now in their terror. Some were crying. Some were praying to gods did not know. Some had simply stopped moving, frozen by a fear beyond words. They descended lower and could feel its heat through the glass. The creature's presence alone was raising the temperature. Plants in the nearby gardens began to wilt. Water in a decorative fountain started to steam. It was like standing too close to a sun. Was crying now, her tears running down her face and evaporating in the growing heat. "We're going to die," she said. "We're going to die here." Wanted to say something comforting. She wanted to tell her friend that everything would be okay, that help was coming, that they would survive. But she could not make herself speak the lie. She could only hold his hand and wait for the end. It opened its mouth again, and light gathered in its throat, preparing another blast of killing fire. Then she heard footsteps. Heavy footsteps, steady and purposeful, walking across the courtyard toward the creature instead of away from it. Turned and saw. He looked different now. He had removed his groundskeeper's uniform, and beneath it, his body told a story she had never imagined. Scars covered his chest and arms, not the random marks of accidents but deliberate lines, the kind soldiers earned in battle. Military tattoos marked his shoulders. Burned tissue spread across his back, evidence of proximity to explosions that should have killed him. He walked past the students without looking at them, his eyes fixed on the creature above. In his hands he carried tools she did not recognize, things that should not exist on this peaceful station. A frame of metal and wire wrapped around his body, some kind of powered armor, small but obviously dangerous. A cutting tool hung from his belt, modified far beyond its original design. And around his neck on a simple chain hung 2 small metal tags that caught the light. Did not know what those tags meant. She did not know about Earth's old wars, about the conflicts that had nearly destroyed humanity before they reached the stars. But she knew, somehow, that she was looking at something she had never seen before. She was looking at a soldier. "Get to the escape pods," said. His voice was calm and clear, carrying a command that cut through the panic like a blade through silk. "All of you. Now, use the maintenance tunnels on the north side. They're still clear." No one moved. They were too shocked, too afraid, too confused by what they were seeing. Stopped and turned to look at them. His eyes were not the eyes of a quiet groundskeeper anymore. They were the eyes of a man who had seen death 1,000 times and learned not to fear it. "I said move," he repeated. "I'll hold it off." "You can't," someone whispered. "That thing, nothing can fight that." Looked up at its burning eyes and metal scales and mouth full of fire. A small smile touched his lips, an expression that held no humor, only a strange and terrible peace. "Watch me," he said. Then he walked toward the creature, alone, unarmed except for his small tools and his old scars, and whatever fire burned inside his human heart. And against all reason, against everything had ever been taught about humans and their primitive ways, she believed him. Headmistress had survived the collapse of the communications room by pure luck. A support beam had fallen in just the right way, creating a small pocket of safety while everything else came crashing down. She had crawled out through the debris, her fine clothes torn and dirty, blood running from a cut on her forehead. Now she stood at the edge of the central courtyard, watching something she had never expected to see. The quiet groundskeeper, the simple human who tended the gardens, was walking toward an infernal as if he intended to fight it with his bare hands. She knew what he was. She had access to files that regular people never saw, classified documents about the human species and their bloody history. She knew about the wars they had fought among themselves, conflicts of such terrible violence that the Galactic Council had seriously discussed destroying their entire world before they could spread their violence to the stars. She knew about the human unification wars, the final great conflict that had nearly ended their species. She knew about the soldiers who had fought in those wars, men and women who had been trained to kill with a skill that frightened even the most warlike alien species. And she knew that some of those soldiers had survived, had scattered across the galaxy, trying to escape the memories of what they had done. Was one of them. She had known it when she hired him 5 years ago. His application had been simple, asking only for quiet work and a place to stay. She had looked into his eyes and seen something old and tired and full of pain. Against the advice of her security staff, she had given him the job. He had never caused any trouble. He had tended the gardens with gentle care. He had fixed things that broke and never asked for thanks. He had eaten alone and slept alone and kept his secrets to himself. She had almost forgotten what he truly was. Now she remembered. The students were finally beginning to move, following his orders, heading for the maintenance tunnels, was helping walk, supporting her friend's shaking body. Other students carried those who could not move on their own. Fear still filled their eyes, but something else was there too. Hope, perhaps, or maybe just confusion at seeing the impossible. Grab's arm as she passed. "Go with the others," she said. "Get to the escape pods, don't look back." But he started. "He knows what he's doing," said. She hoped it was true. "Go now." Hesitated for a moment, looking back at the man walking toward death. Then she nodded and helped toward the tunnels, joining the stream of escaping students. Did not follow. She could not leave, not yet. She had to see what happened. She owed that much. The had noticed the human now. It turned its great head, its burning eyes focusing on this small creature that dared to approach it. In 1,000 years of hunting, it had learned that prey ran away. This one was running toward it. The did not understand, but it was not worried. Nothing so small could possibly threaten it. Stopped about 50 meters from the beast. He was checking his equipment, making sure everything was ready. The powered frame around his body hummed with energy. The cutting tool in his hand glowed with barely contained heat. His movements were quick and precise, the movements of a man who had done this 1,000 times before. Had read the files. She knew what human soldiers were capable of, but reading about it and seeing it were two very different things. He opened its mouth and screamed. The sound was beyond description, a noise that seemed to shake the very fabric of space. Windows shattered throughout the station. The remaining students covered their ears and ran faster, even had to step back, her ears ringing with pain. Did not flinch. He did not even blink. He just stood there, waiting, watching the creature with eyes that held no fear at all. It was confused now. Its scream usually paralyzed prey with terror. This creature should be frozen, helpless, easy to consume. Instead, it was looking at with an expression that the beast did not recognize. It was the look of a predator meeting another predator. The lunged forward, its massive jaws opening wide enough to swallow a small ship. Its teeth were like swords, each one longer than was tall. The attack was fast, almost too fast to see. But was faster. He moved in a way that should have been impossible for a human body. The powered frame around him enhanced his muscles, made him stronger and quicker than any normal man. He dove to the side, rolling under the creature's jaw, and came up running along its neck. The cutting tool in his hand flashed once, twice, 3 times. Each strike was precise, aimed at specific points along the throat. Not random cuts, but surgical strikes at the nerve clusters that controlled its plasma breath. The screamed again, but this time the sound was different. This time there was pain in it. Watched with her mouth open. She had seen recordings of human soldiers in combat before, but those old videos had not prepared her for the reality. Fought like a force of nature, like a storm given human form. Every movement had purpose. Every strike was aimed to cause maximum damage. He was not just fighting he was hunting it. The creature thrashed, trying to throw him off. Its massive tail swept across the courtyard, destroying everything in its path. Jumped at the last moment, using the tail's movement to launch himself higher. He landed on this back and drove his cutting tool deep into the flesh between 2 metal scales. The beast howled and rolled, crashing through the wall of the central building. Debris flew everywhere. Dust and smoke filled the air. For a long moment could not see anything. Then the smoke cleared and she saw standing on the rubble, facing which was rising again. Blood dripped from a wound on his forehead. One of his arms hung at a bad angle, but he was still standing, still fighting, still refusing to surrender. They looked at him with new eyes. In 1,000 years, nothing had ever hurt it like this. Nothing had ever made it feel something it barely remembered, fear. But it was still hungry, and it was still far larger and stronger than this tiny human. It gathered its strength for another attack, and fire began to build in its throat once more. Saw the fire coming. He knew he could not dodge this time. His body was too damaged, his speed too reduced. The powered frame was failing, its energy nearly exhausted. He had maybe 1 more minute of enhanced ability left. 1 minute, it would have to be enough. He did not run away. He did not try to hide. Instead, he did something that made no sense at all. He ran toward the fire. They released its blast of plasma, a stream of superheated death that could melt steel and stone. It roared toward, filling the air with light and heat. Anyone else would have been vaporized in an instant. But was not anyone else. He was a survivor of the human unification wars. He had walked through fire before. He dove through a gap in the station's floor, dropping into the maintenance level below just as the plasma passed overhead. The fire missed him by centimeters. He could feel his skin burning, his hair catching fire, but he kept moving, kept fighting, kept refusing to die. Above him, the roared in frustration. Its prey had escaped again. How was this possible? How could something so small, so weak, so fragile keep surviving? It did not understand. It had never understood. Humans were not strong. They were not fast. They were not tough, but they had something that no other species in the galaxy possessed in quite the same way. They simply did not know how to give up. The maintenance level of Starlight Academy was a maze of pipes and wires and narrow corridors. It was not designed for combat. It was designed for workers to move quietly, fixing things that broke, keeping the station running smoothly. Had spent 5 years learning every corner of this maze. Now, that knowledge was the only advantage he had left. He ran through the darkness, his lungs burning, his damaged arm screaming with pain. Behind him, he could hear the tearing through the floor above, searching for him, destroying everything in its path. The creature was angry now, really angry. It had never been hurt like this before. It wanted revenge. Good thought, angry enemies made mistakes. He found what he was looking for in the engineering section, a coolant line, carrying liquid nitrogen to keep the station's power systems from overheating. He had helped install this line 3 years ago. He knew exactly how much pressure it could handle before it burst. The crash through the ceiling, filling the corridor with fire and metal scales. Its burning eyes found in the darkness, and it lunged forward, its mouth opening wide. Waited until the last possible moment. Then he slashed the coolant line with his cutting tool and dove to the side. The liquid nitrogen erupted like a frozen hurricane. It hit the space at temperatures cold enough to freeze steel solid. The creature screamed, a sound of pure agony as the heat in its eyes met the impossible cold. Ice formed on its scales, crackling and spreading. One of its wings, caught in the spray, froze completely, the membrane shattering like glass. The pulled back, blinded and crippled, crashing through walls as it retreated, did not give it time to recover. He was already moving, climbing through the wreckage, looking for his next opportunity. His powered frame was almost dead now. He could feel it failing, the enhanced strength fading from his limbs. Soon he would be just a normal human again, facing a creature that had destroyed entire fleets. But he was not finished yet. The students. He had to remember the students. Every minute he kept fighting was another minute for them to escape. That was all that mattered. Not his survival, not his pain, not his fear. Only the children he had promised to protect. Had not gone to the escape pods. She had helped reach the tunnels, had made sure her friend was safe with the other students. But then she had turned back. She could not explain why. Some force she did not understand pulled her toward the battle, toward the man who was fighting alone against impossible odds. She found a hiding spot behind a collapsed pillar, close enough to see but far enough to stay safe. From there, she watched the fight unfold. It was nothing like she had imagined. In stories, battles were glorious things, full of heroic poses and dramatic speeches. This was not like that at all. This was brutal and desperate and ugly, was covered in blood, his own and the creature's. He moved like a machine that was breaking down, each step slower than the last, each strike weaker than the one before. But he would not stop. No matter how many times they knocked him down, he got back up. No matter how badly he was hurt, he kept fighting. It was the most terrifying and beautiful thing had ever seen. The had recovered from the cold attack. Its frozen eye had healed, the damaged tissue replaced by new growth. Its broken wing was regenerating, the metal-organic flesh knitting itself back together. These creatures were almost impossible to kill. They could survive wounds that would destroy any normal being. Almost impossible, not completely impossible. Knew the creature's weakness. He had studied Infernal years ago during the wars when there had been talk of using them as weapons. Their bodies could regenerate from almost any damage. Their scales could resist almost any attack. But their brains, hidden deep inside their skulls, were vulnerable. If you could reach the brain, you could kill them. The problem was getting there. He attacked again, its tail sweeping across the courtyard like a massive whip. Tried to dodge, but his body was too slow now. The tail caught him in the chest and sent him flying through the air. He crashed into a wall and fell to the ground, coughing blood. His ribs were broken. He could feel them grinding against each other every time he breathed. The powered frame finally died completely, leaving him with only his own failing strength. His cutting tool was damaged, barely functional. He had no backup weapons, no reinforcements, no plan. He had only himself. Slowly, painfully, he stood up. The stared at him. In its ancient mind, something like wonder was forming. It had fought countless battles across countless worlds. It had killed creatures much larger and stronger than this human, but none of them had ever fought like this. None of them had ever refused to die with such stubborn determination. What were these humans? Where did they find this strength? Met the creature's eyes. He was dying. He knew it. The internal bleeding alone would kill him in minutes if he did not get medical attention. But that did not matter. Nothing mattered except the next few seconds. "Come on," he whispered. "Come on, you bastard, finish it." The lunged. Moved. What happened next took less than 3 seconds. Saw it happen, but her mind could not process it. It was too fast, too violent, too impossible. Did not try to dodge this time. Instead, he ran toward this open mouth. He dove between its teeth, letting them cut his flesh, using the creature's own momentum to carry him forward. He slid down its throat like a man diving into a tunnel of fire. The felt something wrong. It tried to close its jaws to swallow this strange prey, but was already past its teeth. He was inside the creature now, burning alive in its heat, drowning in its blood, but still moving, still fighting, still climbing. The cutting tool was almost dead. Its glow had faded to barely a flicker, but it had one more cut left in it, one more strike. Save that strike for the only target that mattered. He found the brain stem, the connection between this brain and its body. He drove the cutting tool in with the last of his strength and held it there, burning through flesh and metal, burning through everything that kept this monster alive. The screamed. Its body thrashed, destroying what remained of the courtyard. Its wings beat against the station walls, shattering glass and steel. Fire poured from its throat, but it was uncontrolled now, wild and random. Then slowly the fire died. The thrashing stopped. The burning eyes flickered once, twice, and went dark. The Infernal, the dragon of the void, the terror of 12 star systems, was dead. Inside its throat lay in the darkness, his body broken, his mind fatting. He had done it. The students were safe. The creature was dead. He could rest now. Far away he heard someone calling his name. A young voice filled with fear and hope, but it was too far away. He was too tired. The darkness was so peaceful, so quiet. He closed his eyes and let go. Did not remember running to this body. She did not remember climbing over the debris, cutting her hands on broken glass and twisted metal. She did not remember screaming's name until her throat was raw. All she remembered was the moment she found him. He was lying in the creature's throat, surrounded by blood and fire and death. His body was burned beyond recognition in places. His clothes had melted into his skin. One of his arms was bent at an angle that should have been impossible. He was not breathing. Had studied xenobiology. She knew basic medicine for a dozen different species, but she had never tried to save a human life before. She did not know their biology, their weaknesses, their strengths. She only knew that this man had just saved 300 lives, and she could not let him die. She pulled him out of this throat, dragging his heavy body across the floor. She checked for a pulse and found one, faint and irregular, but there. He was alive. Somehow, impossibly, he was still alive. "Help," she screamed. "Someone help me." Headmistress appeared from the smoke, her face gray with dust and tears. Behind her came others, teachers and students who had not yet made it to the escape pods. Together, they lifted his body and carried him to the medical bay, the one part of the station that they had not destroyed. The medical machines were designed for alien species, but they could be adjusted for humans. The doctors worked through the night, fighting to save a man who should have died 100 times over. They repaired his broken bones. They healed his burned skin. They restarted his heart when it stopped, not once but twice. And somehow, against all odds, survived. The military arrived 4 hours after the attack. They found the dead, the station damaged but mostly intact, and 287 students safely evacuated to the escape pods. 12 students had died in the initial attack, before had intervened. None died after. The soldiers had seen many things in their careers, but they had never seen anything like this. An infernal killed by a single human with nothing but a cutting tool and his bare hands. It was impossible. It went against everything they knew about humans, about the basic rules of combat. And yet, the evidence was right in front of them. Word spread quickly across the 12 star systems. The story was too incredible to contain. A quiet groundskeeper who was secretly a legendary warrior. A pacifist academy attacked by a creature of nightmare. A battle that should have ended in tragedy but instead became a miracle. Everyone wanted to know more about the human who had killed a dragon. Spent 3 months in the medical bay. The damage to his body was severe, and even with advanced technology, some scars could not be healed. He would walk with a limp for the rest of his life. One of his hands would never close completely again. But he was alive, and slowly, painfully, he recovered. Visited him every day. At first, she just sat by his bed, watching him sleep, making sure he was still breathing. Later, when he was conscious, she talked to him. She told him about the students who had survived, about the repairs to the station, about the messages of thanks that were pouring in from across the galaxy. He listened quietly, saying little. He did not seem interested in the fame or the gratitude. He only asked one question, the same question every day. Are the students safe? And every day gave him the same answer. Yes, because of you. One day, about 2 months into his recovery, the admiral of the fleet came to visit. She was a tall woman with silver skin and eyes like stars, the most decorated officer in the military. She brought with her a long list of honors, medals, commendations, citizenship in 4 different star systems, a position in any military he chose to join. Refused everything. The admiral was confused. You are a hero, she said. You deserve recognition. I was just doing my job, replied. I'm a groundskeeper. The gardens probably need tending by now. The admiral left, shaking her head in wonder. She had commanded fleets and won wars, but she did not understand this strange human at all. When she was gone, asked the question she had been holding inside for weeks. Why did you do it? Why did you risk everything for students who barely knew you existed? Some of them were cruel to you. They mocked you, called you primitive. Why did you save them? Was silent for a long time. He stared out the window at the stars, at the peaceful darkness that stretched forever in all directions. Because someone should, he finally said. That's what humans do. We're not the strongest or the most advanced, but we don't leave people behind. We don't let monsters win, not if we can help it. He paused, his eyes growing distant, seeing things that could not imagine. I was a soldier once. I did terrible things in terrible wars. I came here to forget all that, to be small and quiet and useful. I wanted to spend the rest of my life growing flowers and fixing broken pipes. I wanted to never fight again. He looked at his hands, the hands that had killed a dragon. But when that thing came, when I saw those children screaming and crying and waiting to die, I remembered. I remembered why I became a soldier in the first place. Not to kill, not to destroy, but to protect, to stand between the innocent and the darkness, to make sure that someone, anyone, would survive. Tears were running down's face. She did not try to hide them. You're not primitive, she whispered. You're the bravest person I've ever met. Smiled a small and tired smile. I'm just human, he said. That's all, just human. A year later, Starlight Academy was rebuilt. The towers rose again, taller and stronger than before. The gardens bloomed with new flowers, tended by the same hands that had saved them. The students returned and classes resumed and life continued. But something had changed. The academy was no longer just a school. It was a symbol, a reminder of what had happened that terrible day and the miracle that had followed. In the central garden where the battle had ended, a new statue stood. It showed a human figure, simply dressed, standing between a group of children and a great beast. The figure's face was calm, determined, unafraid. At its feet, a small plaque read, "For and for all those who stand between darkness and light. Humanity's gift to the stars is not their weapons, it is their hearts." Saw the statue exactly once on the day it was unveiled. He said nothing about it. He simply looked at it for a long moment, nodded once and returned to his gardens. But sometimes in the early morning when he thought no one was watching, the students would see him standing before the statue. He would look up at the stone face, at the children it protected, at the words carved below. And sometimes, just sometimes, they would see him smile. He never spoke of his past again. He never talked about the wars or the battles or the things he had done. He just continued his quiet life, tending his gardens, fixing what was broken, being kind to the students who now looked at him with wonder instead of mockery. He was not looking for fame or recognition. He had never wanted to be a hero. He had only wanted to protect the innocent, to give them a chance to live and grow and become whatever they were meant to be. That was the human way. That was what his species had always done since the first days on their distant blue world. They stood up when others fell. They fought when others fled. They loved when others hated. They hoped when others despaired. They were small and fragile and short-lived, these humans. They were primitive by galactic standards, newcomers to the stars. But they carried something inside them that no other species could quite match. They carried the fire of those who refused to surrender. And sometimes, just sometimes, that fire was enough to change the universe.